Now, Game Week 34, given it's a blank, is going to be a really popular time for managers to use their free hit. And if you're one of those managers, well, I've got a draft for you. All right, we're going to start off then by talking about the defense. And I think in order to pick defenders on your free hit draft, you need to pick them from teams you think, or, you know, in terms of odds, are most likely to keep clean sheets, right? And what we've got here is the clean sheet odds for Game Week 34 according to Draft Hound. And I think there are probably three outstanding teams in terms of clean sheet odds. And, well, it's the three teams that play the promoted and likely relegated teams in the league this season. So Fulham have got Southampton away. They're top, 64% odds of a clean sheet. However, Southampton are pretty famous for wiping out clean sheets, as of course they did against West Ham at the final minute of the game in Game Week 33. But Fulham still top. Newcastle, 50% to keep a clean sheet. They've got Ipswich at home. Wolves, they've not been the best defensively this season, but they're playing Leicester. They've got Leicester at home, 45% to keep a clean sheet. And there's actually a few other teams that have relatively good odds as well. Chelsea, 44% against Everton. Brighton, 40% against West Ham. And Liverpool, 38% against Tottenham. And I think all of that put together gives you, I think, a rough idea of the kind of defenders you need to pick. I'm going to share who I've gone for. So I've gone at the moment for a back four of Leno, Aït-Nouri, Livramento and Robinson, right? But there is one special Fulham defender in there who I think could well be a better pick than any of those defenders, and that's Ryan Sessegnon. So I checked SofaScore in the Fulham game in Game Week 33 against Chelsea, and it says that Sessegnon was subbed off with an injury. Now, I don't actually think he's injured, but he may have a knock from that game against Chelsea. Definitely one to monitor and keep tabs on. But I think if Sessegnon does start and we get good solid view that he is going to start, and well, I think he could be a really good option for Game Week 34. He's starting as a winger, and he's getting goals and assists from that position, and being classed as a defender in FPL, he's going to pick up points for, well, hopefully a clean sheet against Southampton. You know, Fulham, I would say across the league have been pretty, decent defensively. I'd say they're probably mid-table in terms of, goals conceded, expected goals conceded, etc. So I think they're a pretty solid defence. So there's a good chance they keep a clean sheet there against Southampton. It's just a case of whether he's fit enough to get the minutes to justify picking him. I think he's probably on the fringe of being picked here, and I think he's probably my main focus of defenders to talk about. Other than that, I've gone for Leno in goal. Now, you could go for the goalkeepers from either of the teams that I think are playing the promoted sides. I think Jose Sar's a perfectly decent option as well. Likewise, Nick Pope. I just have a feeling that Leno is going to make more saves than those other goalkeepers. And I think for that reason, he's going to score more points. So that's why I've gone for Bernd Leno. I do think Nick Pope and Jose Sar, maybe you could even go for some of the other teams with high clean sheet odds as well and go for their goalkeeper. But for me, going for Leno. Aït-Nouri as well. Not quite as attacking as we saw at the start of the season under Gary O'Neill under their new manager, but I still think he's the outstanding pick of the Wolves defenders. Obviously plays Leicester at home, who pretty much dead and buried in the league. And Livramento, I've gone for Livramento as well for Newcastle. I think he's probably the strongest of all of the Newcastle defenders. But I do think if Sessegnon is declared fit, looks like he's going to start, I could be going triple Fulham on my free hit draft and triple targeting Southampton, and it's going to be like a dagger to the heart when they concede a last-minute goal, just as West Ham did in Game Week 33. But as things go at the moment, that's my defence. And like I said, Sessegnon, he's on the fringe. In terms of midfielders, I thought I'd start by just looking at the Fantasy Football Hub expected points. So what we've got here is a ranking of the top midfielders for expected points just for Game Week 34. I'm not necessarily saying I've picked the top 5 or 4 in here in my midfield, but it just gives you a view of what the algorithm is saying are the best midfield picks, right? Got Salah number 1. I don't think that's any real surprise. I'd say that's a decent fixture against Tottenham at home. Palmer number 2, Everton at home. He's not scored for a little while in the Premier League. The game is ongoing against Fulham at the time that I'm recording this video, so if he scores in that game, then fair enough. But I think regardless, I still think Cole Palmer is a good pick. Harvey Barnes, who's been a little bit of a star of late for Newcastle, and as well as I think he's been playing, and as great as he is, we all know, well, I guess Eddie Howe's not really in the picture for Newcastle at the moment, but I was just going to say, we all know how Anthony Gordon is a bit of a teacher's pet at Newcastle. And I did feel like it was only a matter of time before he kind of just comes into the squad for Harvey Barnes. So yes, I think you think of the current Newcastle midfielders you can pick from. For me, it's between two in Harvey Barnes and Jacob Murphy. Now, I would probably argue Harvey Barnes of recent has had the better share of returns, but I think Murphy's minutes are probably more secure. It seems mad to say that in terms of the fact that Barnes has probably played better, but Murphy's got more secure minutes. I think obviously because Murphy's quite happy on the right, but Gordon will probably play on the left in for Barnes. I guess that's the question. Outside of those three, you've got Luis Diaz, Mbumo and Semenyo as well. Here's who I've picked. So I've gone for midfield four, back three, midfield four. Gone for Salah and Palmer. I think those two are kind of shoo-ins, really. You could argue, I guess, that you could go against Palmer, given his recent form in the Premier League. And likewise, Jacob Murphy. I'm not going to argue the case to swap him too badly for Harvey Barnes. I personally just trust his minutes a little bit more. But as the week goes on, we get a little bit more info, for example, maybe about Anthony Gordon. Might be swayed either way on that. And despite not appearing on like those top players for expected points, I've actually gone for Jarrod Bowen because I really like him as an option, and I don't really like Brighton. Certainly from a defensive perspective, I don't really like Brighton. I just think Bowen is that absolute talisman for West Ham. Pops up with goals. Wow, just solidify, just a solid goal scorer, I was trying to say there. And yeah, I really like him as an option. Rewarded managers against Southampton who went for him in Gameweek 33 with the goal. And yeah, I fancy his chances against Brighton in Gameweek 34 as well. There are definitely midfield alternatives. Like I said, you could go for someone like Harvey Barnes. You could even go for Mbumo. In fact, I'll just go back to the top midfield list. I think Mbumo is a perfectly decent option, right? The only thing that would put me off him is the fact that he's playing Nottingham Forest away, which is obviously a team fighting for the Champions League this season and have been one of the strongest teams in the league defensively. And it's away from home for Mbumo. So I think you could do differently or do better by going different than Mbumo. I completely respect your opinion though if you're picking Mbumo, but for me, I'm going for Jarrod Bowen, Jacob Murphy, Palmer and Salah. Let me know in the comments if there's any other midfielders that you would pick. We'll do the same with the forwards then. So this is a ranking of the top forwards for expected points. Isak number one. I don't think that's a real surprise. Isak 20 goals, over 20 goals this season, I think, against Ipswich at home, a promoted team. Pretty obvious that he's going to be top. You got Cunha, who obviously started for Wolves against Man United, so he's back in the picture for sure for Wolves now. He's got Leicester at home as his fixture. I mean, what a great fixture. What a great player. I think, those two are kind of absolute shoo-ins, really. I doubt you'll see a free hit draft without Isak and Cunha in it. And then I think the third striker is a little bit open. And the four players you're seeing on this list, I think, are the four options that you could have as that third striker. You could obviously go double Wolves and pick Strand Larsen, who's obviously got the good fixture against Leicester. You could see also Man United as a team to target. They're playing kids while they're chasing the Europa League title. So Evan Nilsson, who has been in pretty decent form of recent, he could be a good option if you want to target Man United. Chris Wood, playing Brentford at home, I don't think, despite all the praise I can give both Wissa and Mbumo, that's great, but I don't think Brentford are all that solid defensively, and I do think, Chris Wood could do something there. Does need to return to a bit of form, does Chris Wood. And then Yohan Wissa as well. Similar sort of argument, I guess, with him to Mbumo is that, well, he's playing Nottingham Forest away from home, who are obviously a really good team defensively. So, yeah, that's just... It's tough, really, isn't it? I genuinely think if you're picking three strikers, it's 3 out of those 6, and probably 2 of them are nailed on in terms of Isak and Cunha, and it leaves you open to the third one. So, I guess you'll not be surprised to see that I've picked Isak and Cunha on my free hit draft. And the third striker I've personally gone for is Chris Wood. I think the form that he's been in this season, the fact he's on penalties, which some of the other forwards... So I'm just going to go back to that list. I think quite a lot of the other forwards on that list actually aren't on penalties. Yeah, they aren't. I think Wood is the only one of those other 4 that's on penalties, and that kind of just swayed it for me. And also, I think I back his minutes. When I say I back it, I don't think the other 4 are pretty minutes risk, to be fair, so I'm not sure that's a fair argument. Anyway, I just have a feeling about Chris Wood. But again, similar to maybe not having Cole Palmer, going for Sessegnon straight in for Livramento, picking another goalkeeper maybe, or alternative maybe to Bowen as well. There are a few places you could chop and change multiple options for. This is kind of just my preference. And in fact, I'll talk on the next screen about other options you can have in each place. But yeah, I think my front 3 would be Isak, Cunha, Chris Wood. So here is how the team looks in summary then. Like I said, you could, if you wanted, depending on the information we get throughout the week, definitely start Sessegnon in there. And then it's a question of, do you want triple Fulham defence Or do you want maybe double replace Robinson with Sessegnon, for example? And then if you've only got double Fulham defence, maybe you could pick someone like a Wobie. Raul Jimenez started the game as well against Chelsea, so maybe you could pick him up front as well. He's not an option in terms of strikers for expected points because he's been a little bit hit and miss with minutes, sharing minutes with Muniz, but he did play against Chelsea, and I don't think Muniz is in the squad at all. So that could leave the door open for Raul Jimenez being an option too. Although I would still say I think Isak, Cunha and Wood are better, just in my opinion. But yeah, obviously the door's open there for Raul Jimenez if you want to go for him. And then you forgot what his name was then. Other options you could go for, I guess you could go for another Wolves defender maybe. Liverpool have got Tottenham. You know, you could, if you wanted to back the Liverpool defence, you could go for them, I guess. I've got Van Dijk on the bench. I think if I was to pick a Liverpool defender in the current climate of things, I think I would actually pick Van Dijk because Trent, you know, he's going to be on the bench against, well, he's going to be on the bench in Gameweek 33 against Leicester. That's what Arnie Stock said going into the game anyway. Like I said, I'm recording this during the 2 p.m. kickoff, so things might change in terms of Trent. But I think with the information we have now, we can't be sure of Trent starting. So I've gone for Van Dijk. I've also gone for Cliver on my bench. I think he's the best of the Bournemouth assets. He played full 90, I think, against Crystal Palace. So, you know, he's back in the fray for Bournemouth. And I think Man United is a good fixture for them. I think I actually backed Bournemouth to beat them pretty comfortably, to be honest. So, gone for him. And then Sessegnon, it's just a question of whether you want to play him, like I said. Other alternatives, like I said, you could go for maybe someone like a Wobie in midfield if you don't fancy maybe Palmer or Bowen, something like that. You could also go for 5 in midfield instead of 3-4-3 like I've got. But I personally think the best way to play it is a 3-4-3 with 3 up front. I think you've got to have Isak and Cunha up front. And then I think a third striker, you know, I mentioned, we'll just go back. I think the likes of Strand Larsen, Evan Nilsson, Wood and Wissa are probably better than the 5th midfielders that you could pick. Again, that's just my opinion. Your view on that might differ. And yeah, I've gone for Salah captain. You know, I think Tottenham at home for Salah is a really good fixture. Unless anything drastic happens to him against Leicester. Well, you won't see this video if it does. I'll delete it and make another one. But yeah, I think he's the best captain. So according to Fantasy Football Hub, again, all of the expected points data you see here is courtesy of Fantasy Football Hub. Link to sign up in the description below. We've got 67 expected points according to them for this team and a 97% AI rating. Yeah, that's my free hit draft. All right, well, that's it. That's the end of the video. I imagine this is going to come amongst an absolute swarm of free hit drafts you're going to see from other FPL content creators this week. That's mine. That's my view. I reserve the right to change it. I've hit the button already in FPL. That's what my team looks like right now, this minute. You know, if things happen to Sessegnon, I get a different feeling about Harvey Barnes, stuff like that. I might change it as the week goes on. Of course, find out in my team selection video. In fact, I'll make a transfer plans video on Monday. And then, yeah, I'll do a team selection video later in the week and obviously make my final decisions on the deadline stream. So, yeah, that's it. If you have any different opinions to me, think I should change any players there, I'd be really interested to know in the comments. I usually say this, but, you know, FPL, it's all about different opinions. If we all had the same opinion, the game would be boring. We'd have the same teams. There'd be nothing to talk about. So I'd really appreciate it if you have a different opinion. Just keep it polite in the comments. And yeah, enjoy the video. Leave us a like rating. And if you want to see more content from me, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel. Should be just around there on your screen. Yeah, that just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching. Catch you in my next video.